I'm just excited about the fact that creator-led brands are really starting to pick up. And I think when you look at what's happening with intellectual property, so many people who have built their public image on their ability to attract attention are now looking at this and saying, what do I do with this? How do I make this into a real business? How do I graduate from being in the attention business to being a business mogul?
Andy, we are live. Let's get this going. I'm super excited to talk to you today. There's so much that I want to touch on about your story and all the cool projects that you've been working on. For the audience that is watching this today that hasn't heard about you or some of the cool concepts you've been a part of, you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this crazy business?
Yeah, sure. So I started my hospitality career at Burger King a long time ago now, before the creepy king made his comeback. I had the good fortune to start as an intern.
Nice.
Yeah. Had a chance to start as an intern in, of all places, human resources. Was fortunate enough, had a professor that was an adjunct professor at the University of Miami. And he also, during the day, happened to be the chief human resources officer for the company globally. And it was just a really great kind of like organic opportunity. Had a connection there that got me into the business and had an opportunity to be in a business that was transformative and just had such incredible talent and opportunity at that stage. When I joined, Burger King was a portfolio company of Diageo, the British wine and spirits company, and had not kind of been on its own for the better part of like 35 years at that point. Had just been a portfolio company of like Pillsbury and Grand Met and then Diageo.
Right. And Pepsi.
And it was just an incredible time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was just an incredible opportunity at the time to be part of a brand that had been around forever, had a ton of brand equity that was really not explored in recent time, and be part of a brand new team that was in charge of the business when it was its own private company again for the first time in decades. And that just provided like some exceptional opportunities where I had the opportunity to learn and grow and move and did just about everything in the HR function, ending up as the head of HR for the corporate, like worldwide headquarters in Miami at the end of my time there.
Amazing.
So, did that, had the good fortune of going and working on a really exciting brand in the fast casual Mexican space, Cafe Rio, based in Salt Lake City. Did that for a few years. Had the opportunity to move into a general management position there as the chief concept officer after a few years in HR, and then used that as a springboard to take a role as the president for And Pizza in Washington, D.C. Did that for a few years, and leading that brand through the pandemic and out the other side was just about 40 years of work, I feel like, into 4 between DC and New York. And then that led me to my last venture before my current one, which was a partnership with Kevin Hart to launch a plant-based burger chain in LA called Hart House. And that was just such a fascinating opportunity to build something from the ground up and to think about how the intellectual property of a restaurant is not just that restaurant, but it could be omni-channel. And Kevin, I think, is a partner in that, and the way that he thinks about his own brand and how he is like just everywhere. I don't know that I've ever seen a human being be in as many places at the same time and use his distribution points as well as Kevin does. That led to a lot of the thinking around the creation for R3, which is the venture studio that I co-founded with my partner, Luke Thomas, as we now work with other talent in the food and beverage space to do the same thing.
Amazing. Oh, that's an exciting journey. It's like starting from such a big company that is nationwide and worldwide for that matter. I've heard that Burger King and RBI does a really good job of having these entry level kind of roles, and you can shadow different teams and find your home and then move to different brands. So that's amazing. And then moving to Cafe Rio, where it was a growing brand that was starting to get its legs and going beyond just Salt Lake City into other markets. And then and pizza, surviving the pandemic, love and pizza, I think it has such a fantastic brand equity, and it does amazing when it comes to like social media marketing and just putting itself out there. And then with Hart House as well, it's such an exciting kind of like entrepreneurial experience working with someone like Kevin to bring this concept to market. And I'm sure that along the way, you learned tons from our last conversation. You learned so much from that experience. And although it didn't seem like you guys are still working on it, you learned a ton and you're applying it to your current venture. What was it about the Kevin Hart experience with Hart House that gave you the confidence or maybe gave you a spark to think about something that was wrong in the market that you wanted to solve with R3? What was that?
Yeah. I mean, so working on Hart House, there were two big ahas for me. The first was when you're dealing with brand incubation like that, there is this constant struggle between, do you go and get somebody who's an expert and pay that kind of money? Or do you go and get somebody who's inexperienced, potentially not be as strong in capital allocation decisions early on, but be able to afford it and therefore have longer runway without having to raise money? And what was interesting about that is all of these early stage restaurant growth brands really, really need that expertise. Like they need to not make those mistakes because the cost of capital is so much greater today than it was decades ago.
100%.
Particularly for early stage restaurants. And, our big aha was that we could afford to do that with Hart House because we had such strong financial backers. But a lot of really well-run concepts just don't at that point. And they have to make these really tough decisions like, do I hire a controller or not? Can I afford to, or can I not afford not to? And so that was a big aha because we said, look, we're building this incredible team, but candidly, they're not fully allocated against a brand with 1 unit or 2 units. You're using them very critically at very important junctures, but the rest of the time they're playing a role that's much more hands-on and, 5 feet and not 50,000 feet.
Right.
And that gave me the confidence in working on R3 that if we could do that and amortize that skill set across multiple brands at the same time, we would kind of get the best of both worlds, which is the evergreen, equity incentivized, experienced C-suite folks in the space. But then they could move from this brand to this brand within the construct of a given day based upon the needs. And we could then use call it, boots on the ground to do what needed to be done in those places, at a much lower cost than if we had built an executive team for each one of those brands independently.
That's actually really interesting. Around the context switching piece, it's like I've seen a lot of fractional CFOs, fractional controllers, fractional marketing experts kind of playing around with different brands. But then I see that there is a risk in that you pointed out that maybe their time isn't fully spent accurately, or isn't fully spent to the best of their ability if they're not able to do the things that they have the highest leverage on doing. So how do you guys manage that team of experts, and how do you guys get them bought into those different brands that you're incubating?
Sure. Number one, I think the big difference is in a fractional CFO or chief accountant or CMO type situation, those are usually just fee arrangements. And they're fee arrangements based on the cost of an hourly worker plus the opportunity cost of the time when they're not working full time. In our case, our folks are equity incentivized. Like they are owners in these brands that we operate. And so what you get is an ownership mentality from a senior leader that's always on, but you also can be far more efficient in terms of wages and allocation to the brands because they're both interested and willing to do that other work, but also able to kind of amortize that hourly rate in their mind because they're working across these different brands efficiently and effectively. And I think the big difference is a consultant is not going to care like an owner will care. I mean, I think every listener knows that. All of our team are owners, both in R3, but then also in each of the portfolio companies that we operate as part of our management fee agreements.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Before this episode, I was going through R3's LinkedIn page and I saw a post that David made, or you made on behalf of David, where he was shouting out his new line of chips. And in that video, he mentioned that one of the hardest parts of running Dobrik's Pizza in Sunset was that he has millions and millions of followers that are not able to try his food because they're either living across the world or they just can't they don't want to wait in line for so long to try the food. And I remember you said that was a similar problem that you had with Hart House, is that there were people queued for hours and hours trying to eat the food, but the ability for someone like Kevin or someone like David to kind of distribute their content and their food and their brand across the world becomes very costly. And when we last spoke, you said that one big unlock for you was actually going down the CPG play as a way to kind of bring more products to market for people to try while still kind of building up that brand that the celebrity or that ambassador or that influencer is trying to build. Tell us more about that and how you're doing things differently between like other influencer-led brands.
Yeah, I mean, so a big component of what we look for in the partners we choose to work with at R3 is, does that founder, does the talent there have this sort of like omni-channel point of view as well? And is the brand going to translate to multiple distribution points? That was a big learning with Hart House, because when I joined, there had been some work done on the menu originally, but all of that work was done leveraging other people's IP and product. And to use an example, like at the time, obviously the two most prominent plant-based burger brands in the market were Beyond and Impossible. The challenge with using that as a commercial restaurant is that you're paying, even on a wholesale basis, for the marketing budget of a Beyond and an Impossible just to even get on your radar. And then you're turning around and giving them the credit for that on your menu.
Exactly.
And what we felt was, we didn't think those products were best in class from a flavor and taste perspective for the general public. Vegans and vegetarians and folks looking to make that decision might have different levels of sort of consideration there. But for the mass market, people were not eating those products and saying, wow, this is so craveable, I can't wait to come back. So we said, what if we did it? And instead of the entire marketing budget for Beyond or Impossible, what if we put some of that into actually just making a better tasting plant-based patty and using Kevin's name behind that to help amplify? And so a big part of the vision for the brand was that the restaurants would be the temple, and then the distribution points would end up being grocery and D2C and other omni-channel growth vehicles. And so that's a big central thesis for R3. In the case of David and his pizza shop on West Sunset, a big part of our brand repositioning when we joined him as partners was to say, what if Dobrik's is not actually a pizza shop, but what if Dobrik's is an entertainment brand that happens to sell pizza as one of its things? But what if it also sells other things that are often found in the same place that those pizza occasions are found, in the lifestyle in which he lives naturally and organically as a content creator? And that led us to snacks. And we have a great partner with a group at Tastemaker Foods that we are working with on bringing that Waivers product to market. And what's really exciting about it is that's David taking a look at his IP, at what says above the door as it says Dobrik's, and saying, I'm going to make this a much broader brand than just a pizza shop. And, we're excited because come the end of this month, we're going to be in thousands of retail doors around the country in very short order. And I think that speaks to, when directed correctly, how you can use the energy and reach of a creator to get multiple distribution points, while at the same time having this home base, the pizza shop on Sunset, where people can come to feel what the brand should feel like, so that when they see it on a shelf, they know what they're buying.
It's very audacious. I think going into CPG is, from what I've heard, talking to other operators and executives, it's extremely difficult. And in order to do it right, you need to find exceptional purveyors, exceptional partners, co-packers, and just understand that game. So the fact that you're doing that as well, and it sounds like you're doing it successfully, it's a true testament of your guys' ability as a team. And I also think that this kind of points to maybe a broader shift that we're seeing in two things. One is like how people are eating food, consuming food, and how people are interacting with brands. And in the first part, it's like, I'm starting to see that oftentimes, like, I'm not able to go to a restaurant every single week because I'm extremely busy. But if I was able to go to a grocery store and pick out something that I have tried before in person, I'm able to kind of bring that home with me and continue consuming that product. And for the brand, it's another extension of possible TAM and possible like lifetime value with that customer. So that's the first thing. The second thing is how people are interacting with influencers or celebrities, right? Like, I'm going to use the analogy of Mr. Beast, and I'm sure you probably want to add some points around that, but the fact that he kind of had this massive failure with Mr. Beast burgers, and then from that kind of pivoted into the Snackables brand, and it seems like it's doing pretty good. It shows that like there is an appetite for CPG products from celebrities. So I think that's like super cool. If you wanted to add something to that analysis that I had there, it's like, I think this could be the future of where we're going to be seeing this going.
I think what Jimmy did originally with Beast Burger, I think is a perfect example of why R3 exists. So he had incredible top of funnel awareness, a really viral video with the original sort of restaurant takeover that they did, and a ton of demand from folks who wanted to see him deliver something that had in-person consumption distribution points. Like, you had a bunch of people who were just hungry to interact with Mr. Beast's brand. Where that didn't go right is that they went and deputized thousands of individual operators without a strong licensing or franchising network and training team, et cetera, to go out and do this thing that seemed pretty easy. And it ended up being incredibly damaging and frankly, like time consuming for him, talking with he and his former team at the time to try to kind of go back and clean all of that up. What we do with creators is sit down with somebody like Jimmy on the front end when he has that video viral moment and says, I want to do this, and say to them, how could we do that in the most useful way? And from my perspective, it's a bit like, and I use this analogy with the team all the time, R3 builds the Apple Store first with the founder and says, let's fill it with all of these interesting devices that we're not really sure how people are going to use them or what they're going to gravitate towards or what's going to be the most important or what's going to be the most frequent. But if we build that Apple Store and put all of those devices out and we deliver a really exceptional experience, we will then let the consumers kind of show us which things deserve to live in multiple distribution points. And I think what you found is in the case of Mr. Beast, if they had done that up front, they may actually have come to the conclusion that Feastables was the answer all along and that people were looking for something in the snacking category or whatever. And it could have stemmed from something they did in real life, like an Apple Store, to see what people glommed onto. Did they care about the burger? Did they care about other stuff? Or were they really interested in the brand itself? And would he be able to promote that more organically through his content creation if it was different? And so that's what we do with our partners. We sit down up front and say, we're going to create this with you, but we're going to create it with an omni-channel view day one so that everything about that experience and the guest experience is architected through that lens. And I think, one of the big parts in our ethos too, Daniel, is that we have a really strong bias, which comes all the way back from my original days as an HR person at Burger King and seeing what the hourly workforce needs to be in order to get results, of creating really, really good jobs in our restaurants. And I think when you create good jobs, when you pay people well, when you give them benefits that matter, when you create a culture that's sustainable, only then can that pour across the counter to customers in a way that allows you to then really figure out what's going to win at scale. And so that's a big part of R3's thesis too, is that by holding the control of that operating model, we can help ensure that the reputation of our partners is protected and that as we grow, they're really going to see that scale pay off without the brand degradation that you saw with Beast Burger.
Absolutely. That is, that's something that I've been thinking a lot about is when growing a brand, if you catch fire in a bottle, lighting in a bottle, you need to have a really strong team in order to execute on that. And so we're seeing lots of brands come up with a great idea and have tremendous backing, but then they fail on the scaling out side of things. And most of the time it's either because they don't pick the right partners, whether it's franchisees or investors, or they just don't put enough attention behind the scenes, the people that are actually running the ship. And those come in, the employees, the general managers, the directors of operation, the people that actually run the show. And so I do really appreciate that you do mention that it's not just about like the hype and about the celebrity that's endorsing the product. It's about the people that actually help bring that product to market. On the point around kind of de-risking different ideas, like trying it out in store and then seeing what works and talking to customers, has there been like, maybe kind of walk me through what was the unique insight that you guys came up with when launching the chip brand for Dobriks? Was there something that customers were telling you guys that was pointing you into that direction? What was the story behind that?
Yeah, what was interesting is as we looked at the business from the outside, before we joined David officially as partners, because he and Ilya and the team had run the pizza shop with another team since inception for like over 2 years before R3 joined as partners. The one thing that we saw is that people were like, there was not a lot of focus on food quality as part of the experience. And that even when the pizza looked great or when the pizza didn't look great, almost all of the commentary was lifestyle related to David specifically. And what that gave us a clue into was that like we could go and turn around and spend a bunch of time and energy like creating this incredible artisanal pizza shop, but that was not why people were coming. And so we've done a lot of work to improve the quality of the delivery, but a lot of it has been more about like basic inputs and just high levels of ops execution. The brand insight was that people were looking for frequency to engage with him and the things in his life, not so much this individual special occasion. And so that leads you to a sort of at-home consumption pattern a lot faster than it might be with another brand. I mean, the pizza shop is small. If you go to visit it as a listener, you'll notice that like there's no seating inside. It's like almost just like slice shop counter service in New York City type feel.
Right.
And so it's very much people like trying to make a connection with David personally. And so that was a big insight into the brand and allowed us to sort of think about the brand, not as like that the first snack had to be some sort of pizza snack, but in fact, the pizza shop as an entertainment brand was really the connective tissue. And so, one of the first 4 SKUs that we have is a pizza flavored SKU, but there are 3 other flavors that are not. And that's by design because we don't want this to be a pizza snack. This is a Dobrik's snack, one of which happens to be pizza. And over time, our plan is to use the pizza shop to reinforce the snack business. So when you see a sweet Thai chili flavor come out, you'll probably see something on the menu at the pizza shop that's an homage to that to help show people that this brand is connected up here, but that each of these occasions are just opportunities people have to interact with his brand on a personal level.
I love that. It's like at the beginning, you kind of learned who the avatar is for David Dobrik's, right? You have to look into his audience and see that people that enjoy his content don't really care about paying $30 for a beautiful slice of pizza. They just want to eat something good and then feel good because they're supporting David. And I'm sure with like, as you bring on like new influencers, new celebrities, you will start to learn about their own avatar. I think an example is like Goop Kitchen and like Gwyneth Paltrow, and her avatar is like someone that's very like health conscious, very much like a little bit chic, a little bit more maybe on like the middle to upper class, like in terms of wealth. And so the types of products that you want to create for someone like that is going to be different. But then you tie it back to like the entertainment brand as a whole and seeing like what is going to appeal to like the biggest mass of people that support David and help him kind of like tell his story with the food and with the products that he sells. I love that. How do you go about finding new people to work with? Is there like, besides like the checklist that you kind of run through, like, is there something on like a personal level that you have to like connect with that person before you decide I'm going to spend like 2 years of my life building this out with them?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for better or for worse, the one thing we have lots of is deal flow at R3. And I think that's because people saw, in particular with Hart House, a really high level of execution, a really crisp brand strategy for why this thing should exist, and an omni-channel point of view about how to maximize distribution points for large-scale growth. The word got out in and around Hollywood, in and around the music industry, in and around with other creators. They looked at that and said, who's behind the scenes there? And they saw much of the team at R3 behind the scenes. And so that has led us to a bunch of different kind of top of funnel opportunities to work with different creators, be it, actresses or comedians or musicians or YouTube creators like David. What we look for first and foremost is, number one, is that founder creator like a cash contributor to their own business? So like, we will not work with a partner that is not financially in this business for themselves, meaning no endorsement deal. It's not a brand ambassador play. It's not a paid spokesperson play. There has to be some greater storytelling aspect and financial skin in the game from that person. And honestly, it's not for any other reason other than that we want to ensure that there is kind of shared pain in those creative moments. And what we found is that there's a bunch of different folks in the space that do brand ambassador kind of mercenary fee-based work. And that's great. And it works in some cases. But there are also plenty of cases where it doesn't do much at all. And that's largely because I think that they're not capital contributors to their own idea. The second thing we look for is there a story there that is greater than just because it's capitalistic intuition? Like, I don't want somebody who's like just looking for another way to make money, because restaurants are really hard. And so if somebody is looking for a get rich quick scheme and they're already rich and famous, restaurants are a terrible channel for them to do that. Like, there are so many other things they could use their likeness for that are much easier and much more useful to the ecosystem of people around a celebrity, managers, agents, friends, family, etc., than a restaurant. And so as long as what we're looking at is somebody who has realistic capital, like understanding of what's about to happen, and they're in it themselves, that weeds out a lot of the things that just aren't good partners for R3.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's, you get the privilege of choosing who you get to work with, and the fact that you do a lot of the homework to kind of filter out all of the excitement that you're getting from your previous success and get to decide like who exactly you think you can add the most value, I think is very admirable. Let's kind of close this off with a statement on where do you see the future of R3 in the next couple of years, and if there's any like new exciting things that you are able to talk about, maybe new opportunities or new products that you're testing out with your current clients. Would love to hear what those are.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say next few years, our goal is to have between 5 and 10 total partners that we work with, where R3 has a meaningful equity stake and is the operating partner for that talent. We don't have a specific like genre to check off where it's like, oh, don't have our Mexican concept yet, so we need that. We're really looking for like authentic long-term partners that make real sense and where we see a reason to be in that market beyond just to make a quick buck on a trend. And so, we're well on our way. We've, the first few deals that we have all happened in the first 6 months of existence. So our velocity is really good right now. And I'm excited to get to that point too, because I think that's where, back to my earlier commentary about, scale of senior leadership, when we've got the portfolio full at that point, that's when we are going to be getting the biggest bang for the buck on the incredible team that we've assembled. And so I see us in that space with a mix of brands that are operating today and those that we're incubating and bringing to market. And so that's really exciting as we kind of like look ahead and say, this is where we're headed as a business. And I would say, when I look at the market broadly, I'm just excited about the fact that creator-led brands are really starting to pick up. And I think when you look at what's happening with intellectual property, so many people who have built their public image on their ability to attract attention are now looking at this and saying, what do I do with this? How do I make this into a real business? How do I graduate from sort of being in the attention business to being a business mogul? That was something that I really learned working alongside Kevin. And, I think he's at a point of maturity in his career where he's doing a great job of transitioning that. So I'm looking forward to us being able to do that as a business with R3 as well.
Amazing. I love it. We've seen the rise of like the chef driven concepts in like the 80s and 90s. And then now we're seeing the rise of influencer led concepts as well. And along the way, we're going to make some mistakes and we're going to kind of figure out what's the right model there. And you guys are kind of setting the gold standard, hopefully, of what it means to actually scale these properly. And also, I think another thing that I'm like super excited about is there is a convergence between some people think that food is going to become commoditized and it's only going to be about what's the cheapest and fastest option versus what I believe is like food is always going to elicit a story and elicit some sort of like good feeling inside of you. And so how can you tie that to like someone else's, journey and story and kind of like make that experience even more magical? So thanks for all the work that you do in this industry. I think this has been an amazing opportunity for me to kind of learn behind the scenes what actually goes on. There's so much more I want to touch on and maybe after this call we can talk about it, but just want to say big thank you for coming on the show and I wish you and your team nothing but the best.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate the opportunity to share our experiences and our excitement. So thank you.
My pleasure. Good luck.